Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Javar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Peah, chapter 7, Halacha 5, and now we're going to be getting into all the laws of Revai. Now, the Mishnah is going to have two disputes about Revai, and they're going to be talking about this fruit that grows in a vineyard in the fourth year. The Torah guarantees it, by the way. And one of the disputes, is going to relate to the laws of Peret and Alelos. And this is going to be a back and forth between how is Bet Hillel going to be reading this, how is Bet Shammai going to be reading this. And this is quite a long set of Gemaras, so we're going to do this year in a few parts. This is going to be part one. The Mishnah reads, it is not subject to the requirement, concerning fruit of the fourth year vineyard, Revai, Bet Shammai says it is not subject to the requirement of an additional fifth. And it is not subject to the requirement of disposal. Now, let's just unpack this and explain it. Mara Fulda says that the fruit of a tree in its first three seasons are Orlah, and that's forbidden for consumption or any benefit. You can see that in Leviticus 19:23, and the fruit of the fourth year is going to be called Revai, and that is going to be permitted for consumption, but there's rules connected to it. You have to take it to Jerusalem, and you have to eat it there. And there's an alternative. You're saying, oh, well, what about if these grapes rot or something like that? Well, you're allowed to redeem it for money, and then you deconsecrate it down onto money, and you can eat it, and you can redeem the coins, the fruit for coins, and you can eat it, anywhere. And one that takes the redemption money to Jerusalem, where it's going to be used to purchase food, it has to be eaten there. You can find out more about that in Meiser Sheni, chapter 5, Halacha 2. But in this respect, Revai is going to be very similar to Meiser Sheni, that second tithe, and the Torah is going to state explicitly that it must be eaten in Jerusalem or redeemed, and the Mishnah is going to really be talking about whether Revai is like Meiser Sheni in other matters as well, and there's basically going to be a dispute as to whether the law of Revai applies only to grapevines or all fruit trees. And some of the Rishonim are saying that all fruit trees are subject to Revai, and they'll even amend the Mishnah's text to employ the term a fourth year vine, to change it to say a fourth year sapling. That way, because again, you have this case. Are you going to read this as a hekesh, where you're going to be saying that it's a grapevine, and then you interpret that to apply to all trees? Or are you going to say that it's not a hekesh, and that you're going to say that, no, it just applies to grapes and grapevines, it doesn't apply to other trees? So that's why some of the Rishonim are amending the Mishnah to add sapling, so that you could say, no, the Halacha applies to all trees. This was just a bad example from the Mishnah. Or, not a bad example, but an example where people got confused from it because maybe it got lost over time without the correct transmission, where people are sitting in the academy in Eretz Yisrael, and today we're in Gullus, and we're not really exactly sure which it is. So that can be a case where there's going to be differences in the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is referring specifically to a fourth year vineyard who will adopt this conflicting view to read the Mishnah that's discussing it as a fourth year sapling. So Bet Shammai is basically going to be saying that when you redeem Meiser Sheni money, you can either sell it to another person, or you can exchange it for one's own money. However, when a person goes and redeems Meiser Sheni with his own money, he has to add a fifth. That's in Leviticus 27:31. That's Doraita. For example, if the produce was going to be worth 4 dinars, he pays 5 dinars, and he adds a fifth, 1 dinar, to the final total. And Bet Shammai's rule that in the case of Revai, no fifth will be added when redeeming one's own money, and the Gemara is going to explain his reasoning and discuss whether the ruling applies in all cases or only selected ones. Okay, so, and when it's saying that it's not subject to the requirement of disposal, let me read this again. The Mishnah says, concerning the fruit of a fourth year vineyard, Revai, which, by the way, some people modify this to talk about sapling, but again, let's just say that it's like a hekesh, and you're supposed to say that it's like other kinds of fruit trees as well, and this is just an example. You can find other examples of a hekesh where it says in the Torah, about, say, like, laws about donkeys, that if a donkey gets lost, you have to return it. And, today we don't really ride around on donkeys, but if somebody loses their credit card, that you have to go and return it, right? So that the case of a donkey applies to other examples as well of other things, not just a literal donkey, right? So the question is, you're going to read this as a hekesh or not? So it's going to get into this dispute about Beur, which is disposal, so that it's not subject to the requirement of disposal. So I have a lot of concepts to explain here and walk you through. So let me just go through, explain it so you have a context of what's going on. So Beur is literally meaning disposal, and that's, you have this requirement to destroy Meiser Sheni that has not been consumed by the day before Pesach in the 4th and 7th year on the Shemitah cycle. Okay, you can check out the Rambam in Hilchos Meiser Sheni, chapter 11, Halacha 3, for more commentary on that. And that, by the way, is in the Rambam. And, by the second to last day of Pesach in those years, it has to be disposed of or consumed. Okay, if you don't consume it, in the 4th and 7th year, then, by the second to last day of Pesach, you have to dispose of it. Okay, and Bet Shammai is basically holding that this requirement does not apply to Revai. So here, there's going to be some question as to whether this ruling is going to apply in all cases. Now, let's talk about this with the Rambam's help and try to unpack this. Again, you can check out Rambam's commentary in Meiser Sheni in chapter 11 for more about it. But basically, here's what it says. It says that the 6 productive years of the 7th Shemitah cycle actually consist of 2 smaller cycles of 3 years each. In the 1st and 2nd years, Meiser Sheni is separated from the crop, but in the 3rd year, Meiser Sheni is replaced by Meiser Ani. That is a poor man's tithe. We learned about that. This 3-year cycle repeats itself, and the Meiser Sheni is separated in the 4th and 5th year, and the Meiser Ani gets separated in the 6th year. There is going to be no tithe taken from any produce of the 7th, which is the Shemitah year. The owner must make certain that he has delivered all of his tithes to the proper destination before the arrival of Pesach that follows each 3-year cycle. In other words, the Pesach of the 4th year and 7th year cycle. Any Meiser Sheni that remains on that Erev Pesach, or the second to last day of Pesach, according to the Rambam, must be destroyed. On the last day of Pesach, the owner recites a confession of tithes, and that, by the way, is in Devarim, and that you remove the holy things from the house, basically, and you have this deadline on when this has to be done, right? There's a limit to how long your Meiser Sheni lasts for. And Bet Shammai is saying, basically, that Revai doesn't have this, okay? And it's not subject to an additional 5th, and it's not subject to the requirement of disposal, like what Meiser Sheni is, okay? Bet Hillel says it is subject to these requirements. In other words, he's saying that the law of the fifth and the law of disposal, and that Bet Hillel is saying that it is subject to the law of disposal, just like Meiser Sheni, and it is subject to the fifth if you're going to redeem it. So there's a second dispute. Bet Shammai says the fruit of a fourth-year vineyard is subject to the law of Peret and is subject to the law of Alelos, and the poor who acquire it as Peret or Alelos redeem it for themselves. So basically, according to the Tosfot Yom Tov, here's what it says. It says that they must either take the produce itself to Jerusalem and eat it there, or they may redeem the fruits and take the money to Jerusalem. So, according to here, Bet Shammai is saying that Revai has limited sanctity, and that is manifested in the requirement to eat it in Jerusalem or redeem it. But in all other respects, Revai is considered to be non-sacred, and therefore Revai, unlike sacred property, is the subject of all the gifts given to the poor, like Peret, Alelos, Peah, Schmittah, and like that. So the final part of this says, Bet Hillel says, all the fourth-year grapes go to the wine press. They are property of the grower. The poor are entitled to none of these grapes. So let's take a look at what the Marafulta says to explain this. It says that Bet Hillel holds that the Revai are considered to be the property of the divine, and therefore, like other sacred property, it is exempt from the obligation of gifts to the poor, such as Peret and Alelos. And Bet Hillel derives the sacred status of Revai from the law of Meiser Sheni, and he's using a Gezerah Shava to equate the two. This is really going to be the debate. Is this Gezerah Shava between Revai and Meiser Sheni going to be a valid one, or is it going to be like how Bet Shammai interprets it, that it has some characteristics that are similar, but it's non-sacred? Which is it going to be? So, in this way, Bet Hillel, it's going to follow, the view of Rabbi Meir, who's ruling when it's talking about it in Bavli Kiddushin 54b, that Meiser Sheni, although consumed by the owner in Jerusalem, is not the owner's personal property, but the property of the divine. And the Gezerah Shava is teaching the same is going to be true between Revai and between Meiser Sheni as well. Bet Shammai is basically going to hold that there is no Gezerah Shava linking Meiser Sheni and Revai, or that Meiser Sheni itself is regarded as the property of the owner, and that it's going to be regarded as the property of the owner. Sorry, Bet Shammai is going to say it is regarded as the property of the owner. It is not regarded as the property of the divine. Rabbi Meir holds in Meiser Sheni that Meiser Sheni is, you have the use of it. You're allowed to use it. Hashem lets you use it. He's gracious enough to let you use it. But you have to do it in a certain way. You have to eat it in the walls of Jerusalem. But it's not your property. It belongs to Hashem. It's Hashem's property. He's just letting you use it. It's not your property. So that is always going to be the point of Rabbi Meir. And basically, Bet Hillel is going to be, following the rule here that the Revai is going to be like Meiser Sheni and is going to be having this sort of sacred status. Okay, so basically, if you look at the Share Muna, okay, it's saying that alternatively, Bet Shammai is holding that although there is a Gezerah Shava linking Meiser Sheni and Revai, and although the Meiser Sheni is property of the divine, there's a scriptural verse that teaches that Revai remains a property of the owner. That could be another way to read it. You can see more about that by the Rashba in Bava Kama 29a. And the Miri has another way to read this, where he's saying that, that the Mishnah finds it necessary to mention the wine press and does not simply state that all the fourth-year grapes go to the owner. So there's another way to read it that, hey, this is very interesting that it's using the term wine press. What does that mean? And why doesn't it just say that it goes to the owner? So there's another um, twist in here. So let's get into this Gemara and start trying to figure this out and work through it. Bet Shammai rules that Revai fruit is subject neither to the law of an added fifth nor to the law of disposal. The Gemara cites as a baraisa that qualifies this ruling. The rabbis taught in a baraisa. Rebbe says Bet Shammai stated this ruling only with regard to fourth year fruit of the Shemitah year, but in the other years of the 7-year Shemitah cycle, the fruit of the fourth year, is subject to both the requirement of an added fifth and the requirement of disposal. Basically, what this is saying is they're saying that Shvius, which is the Shemitah year, it refers to this 7-year cycle, and in that you have the 7th and final year of the 7-year agricultural cycle, and he's basically saying that during that year you're not allowed to cultivate the land, and everything that grows there is going to be ownerless. It has to be left to the poor, and is free to all who wish to take it, rich and poor, and even animals. So, according to Rebbe's understanding of what Bet Shammai is ruling, this is only talking about Revai that grew in the Shemitah year. And basically, just like over here with the Shemitah year, that has a whole different set of rules, that the produce is available to everyone, even animals, that he's basically saying that Bet Shammai's ruling is only about Revai that grew in the Shemitah year and is exempt from the laws of the added fifth and disposal, and that which grows, during any of the other years of the Shemitah cycle is going to be subject to these laws. In other words, really the cleverness of this insight by Rebbe is he's saying that there's really no dispute, and that all Bet Shammai is doing is stating something which, by the way, Bet Hillel would agree with as well. He's saying that, of course, Bet Hillel would agree that, it's going to be like, the other Shemitah produce, and that, if you're saying that, this fourth year, these grapes from the fourth year of this vineyard was planted 4 years earlier. Now the fourth year of this vine is landing on the 7th year of the Shemitah. He's saying, of course, even Bet Hillel would agree with that, and that there's no dispute at all. That's basically what Rebbe's saying. Here's what the Rosh Cirilio says about this. Here's what he says. He says that Rebbe addresses the dispute concerning an added fifth and disposal, but does not say whether the dispute of Peret and Alelos is also limited to the Revai of the Shemitah. However, it seems obvious that since the produce of the Shemitah is ownerless, there can be no obligation of Peret and Alelos in that year, for one cannot be required to provide the poor with that which he does not own. Remember, the case of the Shemitah produce is that you don't own it that year. That's not your produce as the farmer. So if you don't own it, you can't give to the poor that which you yourself don't partially own. Okay, you can't own the vine and the grapes to separate off the Peret. So how do you do it? So basically, what the Rosh Cirilio is saying is that, although Rebbe understands the first dispute to be concerned with Revai of Shemitah, he must agree that the second dispute regarding Peret and Alelos concerns Revai that grows during the other years of the Shemitah cycle. So basically, according to how Rebbe is explaining this, that there's really going to be no dispute on this part between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, because Bet Shammai, this is a brisa basically saying that Bet Shammai is saying that this Revai is happening on the 7th year, and that if you're talking about the second part of the Mishnah, you're talking about what about Peret and Alelos, not talking about the Peret and Alelos on the 7th year, but it's talking about the parent and alelos on other years? What's going to be in the case of other years? So that's a really amazing reading, and it's a really deep one. So the Gemara is now going to explain Bet Shammai's reasoning according to Rebbe. Here's how the Gemara reads. It says, in the view of this Baraisa, Bet Shammai derived the law of a fourth-year sapling from none other than that of the law of Meiser Sheni. In other words, according to Bet Shammai, Meiser Sheni is going to be the source of the requirement to add a fifth when redeeming non-Schmittah Revai and to dispose of it in its proper time. So you have this, Gezer Shava that is going to equate Meiser Sheni and Revai. And with regards to Revai, it says over there in Leviticus 19:24, it says, and in the fourth year, all its fruit shall be sanctified for praises to Hashem. With regard to Meiser Sheni, over in Leviticus 27:30, it's going to say this. It's going to say, any tithe of the land, of the seed of the land, of the fruit of the tree, it is for Hashem. It is holy to Hashem. And basically what he's saying that the shared wording in the verse between holy over here, where it's talking about the Revai, and holy over here, where it's talking about the Meiser Sheni, is going to create a scriptural analogy between these two laws. And on the basis of the analogy, basically Bet Shammai is going to say that the law of Revai is connected with the laws of Meiser Sheni. And just as Meiser Sheni, therefore, is going to be subject to the law of adding a fifth and disposal, so too will be Revai. That's basically, in a nutshell, how is Bet Shammai deriving this, right? How is he proving it? So here's what follows in the Gemara. It says, just as you say that there is no requirement of Meiser Sheni during the Shemitah year, in the same year there is no requirement of adding a fifth or the disposal of a fourth-year sapling during the Shemitah year. Basically, Bet Shammai is ruling that one does not add a fifth when redeeming the Revai fruit of the Shemitah, nor is such a fruit subject to the law of disposal. So, what a clever reading by Rebbe. Basically, Rebbe is saying that Bet Shammai has this Gezer Shava between Meiser Sheni and Revai, and he's using it to teach that in ordinary years, when the law of Meiser Sheni applies, Revai is like Meiser Sheni and is subject to the laws of adding a fifth and disposal. But during the Shemitah years, when the laws of Meiser Sheni and the other tithes do not apply, this is because the produce of the Shemitah, the seventh year, is considered to be ownerless, and therefore we know for everything that we've been working on that ownerless property is exempt from tithes. So basically, Bet Shammai is saying that just as this Gezer Shava is teaching that Revai is subject to these laws in ordinary years, it is also teaching that during the Shemitah year, Revai are not subject to these laws. That's the deep point about that. Let me say that again. Why is Bet Shammai saying it with regard to Revai that lands on the seventh year of the Shemitah cycle? Why does he care about that? And basically, the point is he's saying that, yes, you have this Gezer Shava between the two. It's teaching, yes, that, Revai is going to be subject to these, laws in ordinary years, right? But during the Shemitah year, there's no requirement of Meiser Sheni. And so, because you don't have to do Meiser Sheni in the seventh year, you also don't have to do a fifth or disposal for Meiser Sheni. And so that is basically telling us that, the same is going to be true of the Revai, and these laws, are derived from the Meiser Sheni, and that's going to not apply to Revai fruit of the Shemitah year. So what on earth does Bet Hillel say to that? So let's take a look at 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 some commentary by the Rashba, where it parallels this in Bava Kama 69a, and he's saying that the Gezerah Shava does not extend to Revai, those rules of Meiser Sheni that pertain to matters, unconnected with its sanctity, and such as the time at which the law and its law is in effect. Accordingly, the Gezerah Shava cannot tell us that during the Shemitah year, Revai, like Meiser Sheni, is exempt from the laws of the fifth and disposal. In fact, the Bavli, Kiddushin 54b, and if you look at the commentary of the Rosh, is saying that the dispute between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel is whether to expound the Gezerah Shava of holy and holy between Meiser Sheni and Revai, and the dispute is not limited to the Revai of the Shemitah cycle, Shemitah year, but concerns the Revai fruit of all years. And in this, the Bavli is going to reject the view of Rebbe and instead adopt the view of Rabban Shimon Gamliel, which is going to be coming up actually also in this sugya as well. But we're just explaining according to how Rebbe is reading this. How is Rebbe reading the Brisa by Bet Shammai, and he's saying that Bet Shammai is saying that really the key thing here is if it's going to be landing on this, the fourth year is going to be landing on the seventh year, there's a lot to learn from this. And that if it's not landing here, there's also a lot to learn from it. And that because it's going to land over here on the seventh year, that you can get a lot of insight that you wouldn't get if it was landing on any other year. And that's really what he's trying to show and to teach. Basically over here, Bet Hillel is also going to be explaining this Gezerah Shava of holy and holy, and that's going to equate Meiser Sheni and Meiser Revai. We know that you can see the parallel for this in Bavli Kiddushin 54b, but Bet Hillel is going to be saying that this Gezerah Shava was transmitted at Har Sinai, and it was only intended to the Revai, to extend to the Revai the stringencies of Meiser Sheni, such as the requirement of adding a fifth or the disposal, but it was not to extend to Revai the leniencies of Meiser Sheni, like the Shemitah exemption. So this is going to be getting into a special dispensation where there's a special understanding that comes as a halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai. And that's why we really need to try to work through this and unpack it, because without knowing that Hillel saying that this is coming from Har Sinai, we're going to be left scratching our head, and that's why we have to go through each detail to try to put together this puzzle. So the Gemara is going to object to this interpretation of Bet Shammai's ruling. Here's what the Gemara says. It says, now, if it is so that Bet Shammai's exemption concerns Revai of Schmittah and is derived from Meiser Sheni, then the Revai fruit of Schmittah should have no sanctity whatsoever, just as there is no sanctity for Meiser Sheni on the Shemitah year. So this is going to be posed as a question, basically saying that there should be no requirement to bring Revai of Shemitah to Jerusalem for consumption. And, Bet Shammai actually agrees that there is such a requirement. And this is going to demonstrate that Bet Shammai does not derive their Revai exemption from Meiser Sheni of the Shemitah year. This is really going to be the question. So, from the Mishnah, Bet Shammai is stating that Revai is not subject to an added fifth or to disposal, but do not say that it is entirely without sanctity and need not be brought to Jerusalem. And even Bet Shammai agrees that Revai of the Shemitah year is sanctified and brought to Jerusalem and eaten there. Okay, again, you can see more of the commentary about this from the parallel in Bava Kama 69a by the Rashba. So basically the Gemara is going to be arguing that, if, as Rebbe maintains, that this Gezerah Shava is able to extend the Shemitah exemption of Meiser Sheni to Revai, it should be not limited to the requirements of a fifth and disposal, but it should impact all aspects of the seventh year Revai. And accordingly, the Gezerah Shava should teach that just as Meiser Sheni is not or is entirely without sanctity during the Shemitah, so too Revai should be entirely without sanctity during the Shemitah, which would mean there's no obligation to bring Revai of Shemitah to Jerusalem or to redeem it. Mara Fulda points out that Bet Shammai agrees that the fundamental sanctity of Revai persists even in the Shemitah year, and it follows that Bet Shammai does not employ the Gezerah Shava to extend to Revai the leniencies of Meiser Sheni. So if you look at that note by the Mara Fulda, basically this is coming to say that, should this Gezerah Shava be used to teach that there is, on the Revai landing on the Shemitah year, that it has, to understand that if, and does this produce have the leniencies of Meiser Sheni or not? And Bet Hillel's point is going to be that this can only be understood because it's a halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai, and it's that tradition, and because it is that you have this special case. Okay, so Gemara is going to answer this. Here's what it says. It says, but they, Bet Shammai, derived the sanctity of Revai from a verse that's stated with regard to Revai itself. For a verse describes Revai as sanctified for songs of praise to Hashem. Now we know this in the verse that we just read in the fourth year. It says, all the fruit shall be sanctified to Lord Hashem. And in the fifth year, you may eat its fruit, so that it will increase its crop for you, for I am Hashem your God. So it's saying, in 1924, in the fourth year, all its fruit shall be sanctified to Lord Hashem. And so that's where it's coming from. It's coming right from the Torah itself. So let me read this answer again from the Gemara. It says, but they, Bet Shammai, derived the sanctity of Revai from the verse that's stated with regard to Revai itself, for a verse describes Revai as sanctified for songs of praise to Hashem, which I just read you in the Torah. And this teaches that fruit of the fourth year is like that form of sanctified produce over which we recite praise to Hashem. What's it talking about? Basically, it's making a connection to Beurim. Why? Because with Beurim, when we go look in the Torah, Beurim, it's also saying it has to be sanctified. It also has to be brought to Jerusalem. And so it too must be like Revai, because the sanctity of Revai is not derived from the Meiser Sheni. It applies even to Revai of the Shemitah year. So basically, they're going to be deriving, says this answer, that Revai is really going to be connected to Beurim. So, we know that Beurim, these are the first ripening fruits of the 7 species of the Torah. And, the Torah does praise Eretz Yisrael for 7 types of produce. Here's what they are. It's wheat, barley, grapes, dates, pomegranates, olives, and figs. And basically, when one of these 7 grow on your land in Jerusalem, it has to be your land, by the way, the grower brings his Beurim to the temple. He gives it to the Kohen. And he recites a special scriptural passage. And in that passage, it talks about the praise of Hashem, praises Hashem. So the Gemara is really going to be describing the Beurim as the sanctified produce, with which we recite Hallel, and basically that they're going to be connecting the verses from over here with Revai to over there with Beurim. And so, and that's how you're getting this connection of it's like Beurim. It has these characteristics of Beurim, and and that's how it understands it. So the Gemara is going to have an objection to Bet Shammai's exemption on Revai of the Shemitah year, and it being derived from Meiser Sheni. And it says, the Gemara says, but if so, the fourth year fruit of Shemitah should be permitted to an onin. An onin is going to be somebody in mourning, one of the 7 closest relatives, like a father or mother, brother, son, sister, spouse, and you enter a state of mourning. And when you're in Aninus, that this mourning stage, you're known as an onin. And there's a question by the Tanaim, how long does this extend? But let's say you're within that definite period of time that there's no dispute about between the Tanaim, and that if it's basically, they're saying that if it's like that, it should be permitted to an onin. And are they going to be extending Shemitah and the exemptions of Meiser Sheni to a Revai? And the Gemara is going to answer that, in fact, basically it's going to be saying that the prohibition of Revai to an onin is not derived from Meiser Sheni. The Gemara says, the rabbis taught in a brisa, the verse states regarding Revai, sanctified. It says Kodesh. Okay? It says sanctified for songs of praise to Hashem. And this tells us that the fruit of the fourth year is forbidden to an onin. Why would that be? Because when you see the word sanctified, Kodesh, it tells us that Revai, like other sanctified or sacrificial food, is forbidden to an onin. And so it's taking, Kodesh from over here and over there, because somebody who is an onin is not allowed to eat sanctified food, not allowed to eat, sacrifices and things like that, because you have to be doing it in a state of happiness. So an onin is not happy, he's not allowed to eat it. So basically it's saying that, because this prohibition is not derived from Meiser Sheni, it implies even to Revai, fruit of the Shemitah year. And the Gemara stated that Bet Shammai derived the sanctity of Revai from Beurim. Now the Gemara is going to question this analogy. Okay, it's going to say, Gemara says, but if fourth year fruit is analogous to Beurim, it should be subject to the law of disposal during Schmittah, just like Beurim of Schmittah is subject to that law. So then basically it's asking a question, why is it that Bet Shammai exempts Revai of Schmittah from this law? It's a very good question. So the Beurim of the Shemitah year is subject to the law of disposal. So according to Bet Shammai, when you compare Revai and Beurim, the same should also apply with regards to Revai of the Shemitah year. The Marafulda is pointing out that although the produce of Shemitah is ownerless and therefore exempt from Beurim, there is a requirement of Beurim produce that achieved a significant measure of growth on the previous year, but was harvested during the Shemitah. And when the Gemara speaks of an obligation to dispose of Beurim of Shemitah, it refers to this sort of case. So this seems to be a very big difficulty. So the Gemara is actually going to dismiss it. And here's what it says. It says, it is because Rabbi Shimon exempts Beurim from the law of disposal, and Bet Shammai concurs with this view, basically. Since Beurim themselves is not subject to this law, they cannot serve as a source to teach the law with regard to Revai. So basically, they're going to be dismissing this Gezerah Shava and this connection between Beurim and Revai. So, when we look at this, basically, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's opinion, which by the way is in Beurim chapter 2, Halacha 2, he's reasoning that since the Torah refers to Beurim as Truma in Devarim 12, chapter 12, Pasuk 17, it must be treated like Truma. And therefore, just as there's no obligation to dispose of Truma, for Truma may not be destroyed, so too, there's no obligation to dispose of Beurim. And the Rosh notes out that the Gemara explains that Bet Shammai agrees with this view. Okay, so basically, as long as so let me get back into this. So the Gemara is going to challenge this idea that according to Bet Shammai, the exemption of Revai concerns the Shemitah year and is derived from Meiser Sheni. So Gemara reads, but if so, the fourth year fruit of the Shemitah should be able to be redeemed even while attached to the ground. So this is going to be left off basically as a question that gets unresolved. Okay, the Mara Fulda points out that this is an unresolved question. And basically, here's what it is, right? So the Vilna Goan is pointing out that as long as produce is attached to the ground, it cannot be consecrated as truma and meiser. Okay, and since it is impossible even to cause attached produce to become meiser sheni, there is obviously no instance in which meiser sheni can be redeemed while attached. So the Gezerah Shava between meiser sheni and Revai teaches that the same is true of Revai. So it too cannot be redeemed while it's attached to the ground. That's the point by the Vilna Goan in his Beur. So the Mara Fulda is going to explain like this. It's going to say that this is known from a Tosefta in Meiser Sheni, chapter 5, Halacha 11, which states that both Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel agree that the fourth year fruit of a sapling may not be redeemed if it is attached to the ground. The Tosefta prefaces his ruling with a dispute of this Mishnah and with Rebbe's interpretation of the dispute, but does not apply the dispute to this ruling. And this implies that Bet Shammai did not state their Shemitah exemption with regards to redemption of attached fruit. Rather, they also agree that even during the Shemitah year, one may not redeem Revai that is attached to the ground. So the let's get back to the Beur by the Vilna Goan to help us to understand it. He's saying that some Rishonim hold that under biblical law, Revai fruit can be redeemed while attached to the ground, although the Tosefta indicates that Revai fruit cannot be redeemed, and they explain that this does not represent a biblical law derived from Meiser Sheni, but is merely a rabbinic decree enacted because it is difficult to properly evaluate the worth of attached produce, or because the redemption does not deconsecrate the part of the plant that subsequently grows. However, from our Gemara, it seems that we learn from the Gezerah Shava to Meiser Sheni that attached Revai fruit cannot be redeemed. So the Mara Fulda points out that this question is left unresolved. Thank you so much.